Welcome to Thriller Recaps. Today, I am explaining the movie, Limitless, explaining every scene as it happens. Watch till the end, and please like, share and subscribe if you enjoy this. As the movie begins, we meet Eddie Morra, a struggling writer, grappling with a severe case of writer's block in New York City. His personal life takes a hit when his girlfriend, Lindy, decides to end their relationship, citing concerns about Eddie's past failures, including a failed marriage. She has also been the one funding the relationship, and everything Eddie needs, as he still has not written even one line of his book. Despite his attempts to salvage the relationship and even proposing to her, Lindy remains firm in her decision. She has made up her mind to leave him. Be it as it may, he expresses his happiness for her promotion as an editor as she prepares to leave. On his way home, Eddie unexpectedly encounters Vernon, the brother of his ex-wife, Melissa. Their conversation drifts from small talk to Eddie's current endeavors, including his struggles with writing. Eddie tells him that he is writing a book. Eddie also asks Vernon if he was still dealing drugs, which Vernon denies. Then, he invites Eddie out for a drink. Inquisitive about Melissa's whereabouts, Eddie asks Vernon about her, then he learns that she has moved away with their children. In return, Vernon asks him about the book he is writing. Now, Eddie tells him about the creative block he has been suffering. Vernon offers an unconventional solution. He decides to help by giving him a sample of a new nootropic called NZT48, claiming he is a consultant for a pharmacy. Vernon implies it will help Eddie with his writer's block, claiming it to be a miracle drug approved by the FDA. Though initially hesitant, Eddie finds himself intrigued by the prospect of overcoming his creative barriers and reluctantly accepts Vernon's offer. Eddie gets to his apartment building where he decides to take the drug. On getting to his apartment door, he finds his landlord's wife waiting for him. She confronts him for his overdue rent. The drug kicks in, making his brain sharper. He asks her if all is well at the law school which she attends, surprising her. She thinks he had been stalking her, so he makes reference to the book in her bag, recalling seeing it years ago during his university days. After helping her with school homework, things get intimate between them. The drug seems to get Eddie to clean up his apartment. Then he works on his books since the drug helped him find inspiration. The next day, the drug's effect clears off, so he submits the work he had made to his editor, who's surprised by how much he had written. Then he tells her to read it. He gets back home to find messages his editor had left on his phone to call her back, saying she's impressed with his work. He makes a decision to go see Vernon to get more of the drugs. Vernon confesses that the drug isn't FDA approved, but that doesn't deter Eddie since he still wants it. Vernon sends Eddie on an errand to get his suit and food for them to eat, which he does. But when he gets back, he finds Vernon shot dead and his apartment turned upside down. Freaked out by the scene, he calls 911 to report the incident. While they take time to come, he searches the apartment for the drugs. He finds it inside the oven with some cash, and just then the police arrive, so he tucks it inside his pants. At the police station, he is asked about Vernon's occupation, so he tries to be vague about it. Melissa calls the police detective, asking him to hand the phone to Eddie, so they talk for a while. Eddie is released to go home. At his apartment, he takes the drug and uses the money to change his looks, getting himself a haircut. The drugs give him enough confidence to hang around wealthy people, with whom he holds intelligent conversations. He finishes his book in 3 days, surprising his editor. He uses his new abilities to win games at a casino and learns languages very fast, accessing a lot of information. He is invited out to a beach in a different country by some rich friends he made after gaining confidence. On his vacation trip, he gets inspiration, so he decides to quit writing to get into the stock market. However, he doesn't have enough cash to finance it. He goes to a loan shark named Gennady to borrow money since the bank wasn't lending him money. Gennady agrees after much persuasion from him. Eddie is hired at a brokerage firm where he is taught how to trade by his new friend Kevin Doyle. He starts doubling the dosage of the drug to make his brain process things faster. By the end of the week, his brokerage account contained over $2 million. He gets voicemails from different brokerage companies wanting him, a reporter wanting an interview, and Kevin telling him about a meeting with finance tycoon Carl Van Loon. He goes out for dinner with Lydia and tells her about meeting Carl Van Loon, which she doesn't seem to believe, saying he isn't a finance guy. She is surprised by his complete change and even more so when she hears him speak Italian to the waitress. That night, they get back together. One day, he offers her a key to his new apartment, and while they were talking, he sees a suspicious man looking at him. On the day of the meeting, Kevin tells Eddie what he expects from him so they don't lose Carl Van Loon. When Carl arrives, they have discussions on stocks. Carl gives Eddie a ride home and tests him by seeking advice on a merger he plans to do. Eddie decides to take a walk, walking a long distance away from his apartment. He finds himself at a bar, not knowing which bar it is. He dances with a girl at the bar, then he moves to an art show with another girl. He spends the night with a totally different girl, but before going to the room, he had seen a man following him. He fights with a group of men at the subway, recalling fighting moves he had seen in movies as reference. He finds himself at a bridge with the drug now cleared from his system. He realizes that he had lost 18 hours of his memory, so he goes home where he tries to do some work without using the drugs, but his head can't seem to understand it. He calls Kevin to inform him that he is sick and he won't be able to go to the meeting, but Kevin doesn't want to hear that. He tells him to attend it, so Eddie doesn't have a choice but to go. The next day in a meeting with Van Loon, Eddie is unable to think properly because he didn't take the drugs while Van Loon throws questions at him. He sees the news on the TV that a woman has been murdered in her hotel room. He recognizes her as the woman he slept with during his time skip and abruptly leaves the meeting only to go puke outside. He returns back home just as Melissa is dropping a voicemail on his home phone. He calls her back immediately, setting up a meeting with her though she refuses at first. He takes Vernon's diary which he had found together with the drugs and calls the contact he found in it. He is informed that some of the people he called are dead or sick, which makes him panic. One of the contacts he called happens to be the man that has been following Eddie for a while. He manages to evade him. He meets with Melissa at a diner, barely recognizing her. She asks him if he was consuming the drugs because she had taken it in the past, but she has stopped taking it now. She tells him that Vernon had told her that people who took it were dying. She advised him not to stop it all at once but to reduce his intake, thereby reducing the effects of it before he can do so. He is confronted by Gennady on his way to his apartment, who came to collect the loan he had given Eddie. Then he takes one of the drugs he found on Eddie. Eddie pays him back his money with the interest. Very sick, he finds his way to Lindy's office, telling her about the drugs which he happened to have hidden at her house. She heads there to go get it for him, but she notices that she is being followed by someone who almost has her, but she runs away. She hides behind some rocks. Eddie tells her to take one of the drugs that would help her find an escape route. She takes the drug, and her mind becomes sharper. She manages to escape, giving Eddie the drug at her office. The next day, she tells him that she can't be with him if he is going to keep taking the drugs. He tries to convince her that he would stop taking it once he had given them the life they deserve, but she doesn't want any of it. Eddie meets with Gennady who demands to get some of the drugs which Eddie gives to him, telling Gennady that it's the last time. Eddie learns to control his dosage, sleep schedule, and food intake to prevent side effects. He hires 2 bodyguards to protect him from Gennady. Then he goes to apologize to Carl for bailing out during their meeting, claiming to be unwell. Carl gives him a chance. Eddie offers to pay a laboratory technician $2 million to reverse engineer the drug as fast as possible. While having a business lunch, Eddie sees a police detective he knows who tells him that he had been ID'd as the man with the woman who had died at the hotel. Eddie employs the services of a top attorney who gets him bail. A meeting is held between Hank Atwood and Carl Van Loon's company where a merger is discussed. After the meeting, Carl asks Eddie his plan after he stops working for him. Eddie gets to his hotel room to find it upside down. He buys an apartment with reinforced security. He meets Gennady who threatens him with revealing his secrets if he doesn't bring him some drugs the next day. On the day of the merger, Atwood doesn't show, so speculation is made on if he didn't want to go on with the merger. Eddie thinks that he isn't pulling out. Maybe something had happened. Just then, they are informed of the visit of Atwood's wife. She tells them that her husband took ill and he was being tested at the hospital. They go to see off Atwood's wife. Eddie recognizes Atwood's driver as the man that has been following and chasing him about, and he also realizes Atwood is on NZT-48, that's why he is sick. Eddie participates in a police lineup and is absolved from all charges. Eddie's supply of pills is stolen from his jacket pocket. Eddie enters into withdrawal, and while Van Loon questions him about Atwood's coma, Eddie receives a parcel that is found to contain the severed hands of his bodyguards while he is with Van Loon. He hurries home and locks himself in, trying to remember who could have stolen it. He sees his lawyer with Atwood's wife giving an interview on her husband's health issues since he has fallen, so he realizes that he must have been the one who had stolen his supply of pills. Gennady and his men start breaking into Eddie's apartment, demanding more NZT-48. Eddie climbs on the edge of his apartment balcony planning to commit suicide, but he changes his mind, trying to remember where he could have left a pill. He goes in search of the remaining drug inside his unpacked boxes and finds it. He opens it, and is about to swallow it when his nerves make him drop it, just when Gennady and his men break into the apartment. He tries to jump from his balcony, but Gennady's henchmen don't let him. Gennady plans to torture the truth of the whereabouts of the drugs from Eddie while his men go in search of it in the apartment. Gennady injects his own remaining drug directly into his bloodstream, telling Eddie that the effects last longer and the withdrawal symptoms are lessened. As Gennady prepares to skin Eddie, Eddie grabs his own knife and kills Gennady. He then consumes Gennady's blood to ingest the NZT-48 in the blood, giving Eddie the mental abilities of the drug once again. The henchmen find Eddie's bodyguard's severed hand inside a safe they had broken into, so they go back only to find their boss dead. Eddie kills the henchman, then he runs away from the apartment. Atwood dies, so Eddie approaches his driver to tell him of the lawyer hoarding the drugs after stealing it from him. They go to the attorney's apartment to recover Eddie's stash from him. A year later, Eddie has retained his wealth, published a book, and is running for the United States Senate. Van Loon visits him and reveals that he was moving from energy business to pharmacy. Van Loon acknowledges that Eddie will likely become president of the United States one day. So Van Loon asks Eddie what if his supply runs out, which surprises Eddie, showing Van Loon knows. He offers a continued supply of the drug in exchange for Eddie's political backing. He reveals that he has absorbed the company that produced NZT-48, and he has shut down Eddie's laboratory. Van Loon invites him for lunch. Eddie thanks Van Loon for visiting, then he tells Van Loon he has already weaned himself off it, retaining his abilities without side effects. Defeated, Van Loon walks away. Eddie goes to lunch with Lindy. After Eddie has lunch with Lindy at a Chinese restaurant, Eddie speaks in fluent-sounding Chinese with the waiter, making Lindy look at Eddie suspiciously. He looks at Lindy and says, "What?" If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe. I would also appreciate a comment because it helps like you can't even imagine. It's a new channel and every bit of support counts.